Welcome, everyone. This is Brian Smith, and I'm going to do a breakdown of who I believe will be the top impact recruits for Notre Dame this next fall based on the class of 2022. With that, a couple of basic points here. Number one, generically speaking, linemen don't make a ton of impact, especially offensive linemen. The bigger guys, it takes a little bit longer, and it's a developmental thing. So with that in mind, understand why I'm going more skill position here. Number two, this is position and need driven. It just so happens that Notre Dame needs more skill help than lineman help as a program right now. So it's going to fit in a little bit more. And quite frankly, most of these will probably not shock people. How I expect them to make an impact may. I'm going to try to get into some detail, talk a little bit about each player. I've got some film I'll throw up here. I know my buddy Brian Driscoll over at Irish Breakdown does a lot of this, and I just kind of wanted to give my take on it as well. I'm not sure that Notre Dame is at a point in their program where they're going to have more than 5 to 10 freshmen really play in any given year. That's pretty much where they've been for a while. But even with a couple of shortcomings, obviously corner is the big question, and I'll definitely delve into that. They don't have a lot of issues. They just need wow players. That's where they're at. They need wow players. And sometimes you can get a 3-star kid. Boom. Everybody and their brother looked at him, but they weren't sure. And then some school could be Washington State. They get a kid and he's second team all Pac-12 his freshman year. Those things happen. Maybe one of these kids that I have or do not have on this list will be that way for Notre Dame. And that's why recruiting is so difficult. As much as I scrutinize it and I watch film literally 365 days a year, it is hard. So as somebody who's followed Notre Dame his whole life, I'm just going to kind of go through some of these guys, talk about some of the key players, the key points, how I think they can be utilized. It's not a rocket science adventure. So the first player, in my opinion, that has a chance to make an impact is Jalen Sneed. And it's not just because he's a really good player. And a lot of people had him number one. I think that Priester and some other guys had him number one in their rankings, if I remember right. I haven't talked to Tim in a while, but I think he had Notre Dame with him number one in their recruiting class as a player. I met him in South Carolina a couple months ago. Great kid, very, very shy, very basic. We had to push him to answer basic questions. He's very unassuming, and he's just happy to be one of the squad. It just happens so that he's the best guy on the squad. Runs like a deer, has the ability to change direction more like a safety than a linebacker. I expect him to flourish in Notre Dame's scheme, basically, that Marcus Freeman runs. And it's not just because Marcus likes speed over size. It's because he's an instinctual player. And that's one of the reasons I expect him to be on special teams units fairly quick. Whether or not that happens from game one, we'll see. But by the middle of the season, it would be shocking if he wasn't. And this is where we get into the specifics. And this is my overall theme on why I like football. In basketball, you've got 5 guys. I love basketball too, but there's only so much you can do with 5 guys. With 11 and teams running all these different variables of the spread offense, some of them like Notre Dame will come out in 22 personnel and still run 4 wide. It's hard. You need linebackers that are capable of playing in space more than taking, this is an example. Everybody knows Georgia likes to run the ball if you follow college football at all. Sneed can play against either. So him being on the field, no matter what they do with the package, you still can't tell until they line up what they're really trying to accomplish. And then, of course, even snap the ball. You can be in 3 tight ends in a power set and pass. But he can handle either one. And for that reason, I think he has a chance to play a little bit earlier. A lot has been made about Notre Dame didn't tackle well in space against Oklahoma State, and they didn't. It was horrific. This is the kind of player that, for a lack of a better phrase, makes up for some of the ills that may happen in front of him or even behind him. He can chase down a play from behind that most linebackers just can't. His foot speed is different. And from a package standpoint, you could see him in a nickel. You could see him in a dime. You could see him in a blitz package. I'm not saying Notre Dame needs linebackers to come in and play right away. They got some serious talent. Excuse me, but Merryweather coming back is not a guarantee that he's going to be the same player. He broke his freaking leg. And while I think Sneed could play that spot at some point, I also think that he could play that rover spot, that overhang, as I kind of like to call it, in college football, where it's a linebacker / hybrid safety. Sneed fits that, at least initially. He's give or take 210, 215, somewhere in that range. Sneed will be one of those guys that can transition to either. Like Jack Kaiser can play either. Same kind of deal, super athlete. I just don't know, like anybody else, you don't know how quickly they're going to pick up the scheme and pick up the scheme of the other team. Every week's a different opponent. It's more complex. Football is very complex at the college level now. But I will be shocked if he's not at least one of the three most ready from game one guys to contribute. And I'm counting again, special teams are a big part of what I'm saying here. When you play quality opponents, special teams matter. You sure as heck don't want to give a quality opponent that can throw the ball all over the yard or run it, a little of both, whatever, an extra 5-10 yards on kickoffs. That's the kind of guy I want on the field. We'll see how it goes. Besides him on defense, I'm not going to show film. I'm going to show Jalen's film in a second. I looked up Joshua Burnham last night, and for whatever reason, and it's his own decision, he doesn't have a senior package, if you will, for his huddle film, and it's just a bunch of short clips, here and there. I know Tom Loy got some footage of him and some other guys, and it's fine. But I want to do a bulk thing, so I'm not going to talk about Josh quite as much. But even though he's probably going to end up in some capacity in his career being a middle linebacker, he can play about any of them. That guy is one of the most difficult players that I've ever scouted to say, well, he's definitely going to play this. I don't know. For his high school, Andrian, he played running back some, and while he's not a quote-unquote natural running back, he's pretty good, and I don't think I would want to get in front of him. It's always good to see what a guy is like when he knows he has to be the man for a high school team that's not necessarily overly talented, and just run the ball when pretty much everybody in the stadium knows, okay, Josh gets the ball. He's the other linebacker that I think, special teams-wise, how would you not put him on the field? He's 225 pounds, give or take. 5 to 10 pounds in today's world of training means nothing. And I'll explain a little further on that in a second. But these two linebackers, him and Sneed, their versatility gives them a greater chance to make an impact. If there's even one injury, and when is there not, case in point, Maris Leofau, you're going to have a sophomore or a freshman at least climb up the depth chart. Maybe they don't seize the moment. I think that Josh can do that. He can move laterally in a way that most guys 225 do not. And when he hits somebody, you know it. Very naturally strong. He's probably going to end up at will, I would assume, the weak side spot. And then the big kid from California, who I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but I guess I could give it a shot here in a second, but he's your Mike. He is downhill. He is a thumper. He can move, but he's a Mike. He is a middle linebacker. So they got a nice combination there. And then Nolan Ziegler is kind of the wild card. Again, athleticism, position flexibility. He's the third guy, and I've got him on my list as well in the next group. I'll talk about him in a minute. The linebacker group for Notre Dame was pretty much as good as any in the country. And versatility and athleticism were the names that you would really throw out for them. They just did it, and all four of them can do that. I think you could make an argument that all four could play multiple spots at linebacker. I don't know if I've ever had a class of guys that were even remotely ranked this high coming into Notre Dame that I could say that about. Off the top of my head, I would say no. Now, just for fun, I'm going to throw up some film of Jalen. And again, this is not what you would call a traditional linebacker, because most guys, quite frankly, just don't move like this at the high school level. And you have to project some, okay, well, teams have more talent at college level. No kidding. How would they try to get around him? This is where just the player being an athlete matters. Watch the way he changes direction, the way when he puts his foot in the ground, it's right now, and he still hits with power, even though he's not a huge kid. When I met with him a couple months ago, 210-ish, something like, I can't remember what he told me he was, but it was in that realm. So keep that in mind. It's very difficult to imagine him after meeting him, talking to his coach and everything else, him not having the opportunity to play right away. The first thing that you're going to notice, look at the distance. He doesn't have the angle, but look at the closing speed. You can't teach that. As a blitzer, that's pretty well timed. So he has some instinct. Off the edge again, they're looking, bad decision. Quarterback should have kept it. They're looking to attack downhill. That's what his high school did. And they utilized him in that manner. Now, this is funny here. They put him on offense. You remember me talking about Burnham? Same deal. He's just trying to be physical, be an athlete. That play was not blocked well. The other team was ready, and he just ran through it. Sometimes you're just a better physical talent. Then, of course, here, even though he's a shy kid. I met him and hung out with him. He's a shy kid, but you wouldn't know that based on the way he plays. It's so ironic. You can't grade a book by its cover in terms of a player. And look at the foot speed. I mean, these are kids in South Carolina. It's not like he's playing against nobody, and he's just running away from guys. This is interesting here. He plays the ball. Most linebackers wouldn't even, they would be on the ground in 2 seconds. He immediately turned up and tried to score. And then this is another one. Turns, runs. As soon as he gets the opportunity, he takes the ball physically out of the hands of the receiver. He has a dominant gene. He didn't want to just break it up. He wanted to pick it. That's going to serve him well. Then right here, foot in the ground, one step up the field, fastest guy. I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, and I'm faster than you, and I'm going to score a touchdown. Works for me. One more play that I'll pull this off, but the point with Sneed here is all the physical attributes that you would look for in a Will or a Rover, it doesn't even matter which one, are there. I mean, you can't teach that closing speed. That's just ridiculous. But anyway, I'll get this off here. Sneed has the ability to come into Notre Dame. Number one, he's going to help on special teams. Two, I don't know which spot Marcus Freeman and all the defensive coaches are going to figure him out with. He's got to conquer one before he can conquer a second one. I'd rather him to be a master of one than a jack of all trades and never be great at anything. But the skill set, he can still make an error, technically, and still make a tackle. God-given ability. In today's world, linebacker is about as close to corner as you can get, as goofy as that sounds. And it's one of the reasons I think Clemson, as an example, took a major step forward around 215 or so. They just said to heck with it. They had guys that were basically safety size or just a little bit bigger at the flanks, and they'd have one like thumper in the middle, kind of like they do now, that's 230. You just got to be able to cover. The middle linebacker for them kind of diagnoses and sends everybody everywhere, kind of like Drew White did a lot of the time for Notre Dame. But your flanks, if you will, the weak side linebacker and the overhang, they got to be able to fly because teams are just going to pick on you otherwise. So he's a great example of that. Now, the other thing that's very interesting with the linebacker class is I don't know if any of them have been pigeonholed by Marcus. I know I kind of mentioned that a minute ago, but I'm interested to see what they do because I could be wrong, but maybe they move Niamaka. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Maybe he plays Will. Maybe Burnham plays Mike because it's something they want to do a blitz scheme or something else. There's enough athleticism there. You at least have that argument. So that's something to think about. The receiver that everybody is excited about, yourself or myself included, is Merryweather. Tobias is that rare kid that's over 6'2", who can put his foot in the ground, go north-south at a guy in a one-on-one situation after he has the football, and then shake him. Now, he's about 6'4". I know he's listed at 6'5", so he's probably about 6'4". But from his foot to his hip, he is really long. He is built like a two-guard in the NBA that's maybe just a teeny bit short. A lot of those guys are 6'6", 6'7", but that's his build, and he's able to move laterally. You ever think about a basketball game? You're watching a young kid, maybe it's your son, maybe it's whatever. You're like, no. And they hit a shot. That could be bad for them because then they get in their head, hey, I can do this. With what I'm about to show here of Tobias, Coaches need to shut their mouths sometimes. He's just better. And I know they probably did. The school he played at, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that they don't get guys like him very often, because even if he was in LA, he's still a rare talent in terms of his upside. He's got some things to work on, but physically, you cannot teach what Tobias does. Catching the ball away from the body. He's a pretty good route runner. He's been coached pretty well. He's very fluid. And this just in terms of why I'm talking about impact recruits, Notre Dame's depth chart at receiver is so short. How would he not get on the field next year, barring injury, obviously? I mean, he would have to just have the worst attitude in practice ever. So I will open-endedly admit this was the easiest pick on here just from numbers. He's a very talented player. So once again, I'm going to share my screen. This is just kind of funny, to be honest. This is some 7-on-7 footage that I found. And that first play there was a real basic out pattern for a touchdown. But here, just watch the way he just cuts in front of the guy in his length. Most DBs can't do anything with that. Here's the same kind of deal. The size, he just snatches it away from his body. It's very natural. But this is the most important play right here on the entire thing. Not only does he get the ball, he makes a guy right there miss, or at least they called it a miss. Most guys his size can't make that dip in and back. They just can't do it. The quickness in and out of breaks, the fluidity, the length, the ability to play. This is pretty smart right here. This is a nice scheme. They put a guy in flux. They put two guys on the corner. I'll give the quarterback and the coaching staff credit. They timed that up very well. Here, he just finds the hole. It shows his ability to understand the scheme that he's going against. Don't overthink it. And then this is a good throw. That's a hell of a throw right there. But he's thrown to a 6'4" guy. Tobias has the ability to beat people because he's going up against people that don't have the same size. Part of it, again, this is not rocket science. If Tobias doesn't make that catch, that's on Tobias. That's not on anybody else. And I'm sure he would say the same. This is somewhat interesting because his ability to adjust right there at the end was really cool. But he runs faster than what you might think. And I'm not saying that he is a 6'7" guy or 6'8" guy, but for his length, he looks different than most receivers. Stop it here for a second and explain this. When I first saw Randy Moss on film, I had to watch it again because it was weird. His stride was so long. I couldn't really tell if all the guys in the field were just slow or if he was fast. In actuality, they were slow and he was just really freaking fast. Randy Moss one time ran a 4.4 in jeans. Nobody's Randy Moss. He's the best recruit I've ever watched, and he's probably the best recruit I will ever watch. This kid, in a similar fashion, however, uses his length and his ability to use up and over plays that are going to be really difficult for teams to stop even right away. So here's another example of that. Watch the length. The DB didn't even do a bad job there, and he scored. The only thing that he's going to have to do when he plays against really good college corners, this is not any surprise to anybody, you got to get stronger so you can get off the line. If Tobias is able to do that and get, that right there, for a speed at 6'4" to be that good, that is not normal. Like right here, that DB did a terrible job. If you're going to play bump, you better get hands-on an elite receiver or he will kill you. And that's what happened. Here's another ball, same thing. If you do not get hands-on, they take it away from you. This guy uses his hands a little bit, but then he got beat to the inside after he had inside leverage. That's terrible. Tobias fights through it, makes a play. And then this one, the kid never turns around, which is, it's a pet peeve of mine. But Tobias consistently looks like a red zone threat to me. He has a feel for the inline. He catches the ball away from his body. He uses his height. He shields the guys. He stacks DBs, all the little things. He has been coached. Notre Dame is going to use his services from day one. Again, barring injury and barring his attitude just sucking, I have no reason to believe that it will be. This is a guy that's going to catch touchdowns for Notre Dame as early as 2022. In matter of fact, I'll call it. He'll score at least 3 touchdowns next year. At least. You're not going to put that on the bench when your bench is so short anyway, because he's really, really, really good. So one more play here. He just he makes things happen that teams can't really define. And I hope that he has the ability to grasp the offense quickly, but just like with Nolan Ziegler or anybody else, Burnham, any of the kids, Burnham, you don't know how quickly they're going to pick it up. So an athlete position, running back, corner, receiver, those 3 are a little bit more. I'm just better than the guy in front of me, especially if they have a unique physical trait. He not only has size, he's got speed. This is not a kid that even remotely struggles to run by guys. He's playing at these pylon tournaments and etc. Trust me, I go to 7-on-7 tournaments just about every weekend from the end of January through mid-June, literally. If you're at a pylon tournament, the guy in front of you has talent. There are a ton of guys. Their technique, they may need different things and all that. That's fine. But he's running by guys that are 5'10", 180, and he's 6'4". You know what I mean? And he's getting by him and stacking them quickly. There is no reason that whomever it may be, and I have no idea, that Notre Dame ends up hiring at wide receiver coach. We're in the midst of that now that Del Alexander has been let go by Marcus Freeman, that they're not going to have a guy that can help out. So I've kind of went back and forth on this in the last couple of days as I was preparing to do this podcast. You could make the argument that he has the best chance to play right away and be an impact for Notre Dame. I didn't rank him. I just put him in groups. And just to give full disclosure, I had Tobias, obviously. I had Sneed, Burnham, and the last kid I'm going to talk about here in just a second, Benjamin Morrison, is my top 4 most likely. Now, of course, as soon as I say that, one of the other kids, Holden Stays, will break out and be the 3rd tight end and catch 25 passes and 6 touchdowns next year. That's just how things work in the world of college football. There's always a surprise somewhere. I don't know. But just based on my experience and literally watching film of all the kids that are skill guys and whatnot, these are the players that I think have the best chance. So the kid that I hope for need for Notre Dame, obviously, to have the quote-unquote biggest impact, without question, is one of the 2 corners. Jaden Mickey could be. I like him a lot too, but I like Morrison even more, and that's why I put him in my top group. It's pretty close, 6 one way, half dozen the other. But I think that Morrison, he comes from good stock too. His dad was a good ball player. It's a situation where I just like his ability before I even break down film or anything else. I like his ability when he's in a back pedal. And for whatever reason, how he reads it, and he's been trained for a long time. When it's time to plant the back foot and shoot forward, if you're going to make a play on the ball, a tackle, deciding it as you get there, depending on how much velocity the ball, he makes plays. He makes plays. If you're not able to do that, are you really going to be an efficient corner, even at the FCS level, let alone Power 5? No. This is a kid that already has that, and he's been trained. Like, his technique is a little bit different than most kids. And I told a lot of people this, and one of my buddies, I can't remember, which might have been Driscoll. Somebody told me to watch his film first, but 2 or 3 different people did. And for whatever reason, when Notre Dame was recruiting him, I didn't get around to watching his film until almost to the point where he was going to make a decision. The reason I really got interested to watch his film is the following. I believe in history and just facts. Nick Saban knows DBs, and he really wanted to sign this young man. Nick Saban doesn't just randomly recruit players in the state of Arizona. Okay? There's just no reason. Benjamin Morrison also could have went to Washington. Jimmy Lake also, he got fired. He got some trouble, whatever. He still understands, DB recruiting and he's a hell of a recruiter. Notre Dame getting him over Washington and Alabama is a testament to Marcus Freeman and, well, quite frankly, just everybody in the back office, first off, because they do a lot of stuff. I've worked with a lot of different guys at different schools on that. They go through a lot. They deserve credit. Then anybody that was involved as a recruit, Mickens, et cetera, obviously, too. Anybody that's on the defensive side of the ball for Notre Dame. But I'm telling you, if the situation with a certain corner who didn't do so well in the Fiesta Bowl continues to fester, and I don't see why it wouldn't, he's just not going to be a corner at this level. Either he's going to have to play nickel or safety or just sit the bench. They've got a major hole for next season. And oh, by the way, they go to Columbus, Ohio, game 1. If they do not fix that hole, it could be Jaden Mickey, it could be Benjamin Morrison, it could be a combination, it could be one of the other corners they signed last year. No idea. But if they don't, they're going to lose by 25. CJ Stroud has another year of eligibility that he has to go through as far as rules go to turn pro. And I mean, he'll never sniff another year after that. But Stroud is really good. Smith-Njigba is, in my opinion, the best pure football player returning for next year. They need young guys to step up in fall camp. And I'm not sure which guys are enrolling early and all that for Notre Dame, but they need to figure it out real quick because corner is a concern. And he's, if I had to guess, I put Morrison and Merryweather kind of back and forth. If I had to guess, I'd say Morrison is the most likely, but they're both at positions of dire need. Numbers are iffy, and they don't have a guy at all at corner. Now, receiver, the top end's good. I mean, Tobias will have to battle through a little bit more if he wanted to, quote unquote, start, but he could be the 5th receiver by week 2, and it wouldn't surprise anybody. It's hard to find guys with his length and all that can run like him. So he's got a good chance to be in the rotation. If you want to argue just rotation, I'd go Tobias, but start, I'm going Ben Morrison. So with that, let me pull up his film. And this is a guy that, again, I probably watched his film a little too late, and I should have been reviewing it earlier. That's on me. But once I did, there's a reason that I liked it so much. I skipped through. He has a whole bunch of kickoff returns. He's a very good player in that regard. So just do note that. I'm not going to waste anybody's time with that, though. He's very, very good at making the first guy miss, which as a punter, kick returner is important. So anyway, he's top of the screen. Just watch the way his footwork goes and the way he can change direction. That one was really interesting because he went back after coming up originally and ends up with a pick. That's about as rare as it gets. Usually people don't do a very good job of changing direction more than once. And a lot of times they don't do it very well, even the first time. So it's interesting to me. Overall, he's just a twitchy athlete. Here they got him at free safety, which is interesting. It depends on the team you're playing. And Notre Dame might do that as well. That's a hell of a play to get over quarterback. Led him right into it, and he took it. Watch the feet. Watch the change of direction. He probably broke on that a little bit late. But again, sometimes when you're a phenomenal athlete, just like I mentioned with Jalen Sneed, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The closing speed there is really good. I mean, I'm guessing they still ended up scoring on that drive, but most guys wouldn't have made it there. Mickey has really good closing speed. And here's him playing off coverage, using his hands a little bit. And I don't even know what that kind of pass was. That was terrible, but you might as well take advantage of it. So the DB's headed the other direction. It's really good to see a guy that has confidence, even though he wasn't on top of that last route from the get-go, to get back in it and get on top. Here, again, this sheer speed. This is something Notre Dame has lacked at corner and that I've bitched about for probably about 30 years. Not enough guys that are 5'11" that can flat out run. Just flat out run. Track kids at corner, I mean, that doesn't work by itself. I understand there's a technique standpoint, but you got to have closing speed. Here, that's just destruction. I want to play that again. That's a lot of fun. If you watch here at the bottom, right hand right into the chest, and then that kid just gets annihilated. If you're that physical with track speed, you've got a chance. Aggressive play here, playing underneath in zone. sinks, hits the guy, knocks the ball loose coming through. It's actually a decent pass. Here's another situation. He charges on it. Receiver didn't do a very good job helping his guy, but then he tackles through him. Very physical, despite being a speed player. Here's another kickoff, but it just kind of gives you an idea of his overall football acumen to see one. I guess it's not all that bad. That's funny that he ran around that guy. It's amazing how many guys jump over players nowadays. It's crazy to me. It's very risky, but here's another play with Benjamin Morrison deep. He times the ball very well. A lot of instincts, and I'm guessing his dad's probably worked on him with some of this, and his high school coaches, whoever his trainer is, etc. He's figured it out, and he's very confident. If you're going to look at anything from a young DB that gets him in trouble, is once they have a bad play, oftentimes they just go in the tank. The way this kid carries himself, I'll be very surprised if that's the case. He had a guy really trying to block him, just worked his hands, got off, made a tackle. All these things make me think that, while Mickey can play too, I like Benjamin Morrison with the speed and his physicality as much, if not more, than about any corner they've signed in the last 10 years. Just being a complete player, figuring it out. I don't think there's going to be too many guys that have his overall package, whether it's Alabama or anybody. Here, again, comes off his guy and makes a play. Instincts are through the roof. Final play that I'll show here. Sinks on this one, gets underneath, and just clobbers that poor guy. That's pretty funny. If Notre Dame misses on Benjamin, I mean, it can happen, but I would have a lot of questions. Again, barring injury, obviously. Strong, fast, instinctual, tremendous timing when the ball is about to reach on a good pass to a DB. That the perfect pass usually doesn't end well. Sometimes he's knocking the ball loose, coming up through the guy, whatever it may be. He did a tremendous job. And I think this is a player that I don't know exactly how they'll use him. Maybe they'll use him in nickel. I've been saying that for a while. I haven't talked to Driscoll about that too much, but I'd like his opinion on it. I think he can help out at any of the three spots, meaning boundary, field, or corner in the slot at some point in his career. But again, just like with Tobias or anybody else, need to master something early on. I have no idea what Notre Dame is going to do. Playing boundary is the hardest because you're in a one-on-one situation with the way Marcus likes to run his defenses. And I assume whoever he brings in to be the coordinator is pretty much going to run the same thing. I'm sure he'll have some of his own thoughts. But if you're going to do that, putting a freshman on an island into the boundary, that's pretty rough. I'd rather have somebody over the top and let him attack downhill a little bit more and play field. But I don't know. They can move Cam Hart back to boundary. He played field most of this year. Cam is a really big corner. I don't know if he's quite as fast as Benjamin Morrison in a short 5 to 10 yard race, and I think that's the speed difference in general for him over most guys. His first step is really explosive, but we'll have to see. I just think he's got a chance. Some of the other guys that I really like in the class, I talked about Nolan Ziegler a little bit. He's an interesting guy that he could play linebacker in terms of the will long term. But if you look at Ziegler, let me see what he's listed at. Not that these things are ever very accurate. The way the kids train anymore, it's really hard to know what they're going to do in terms of walking in the door. If a kid's listed at 210 right now, he might come in at 228. That happens. 24/7 has Ziegler at 6'4", 210. So I'm going to guess he's 6'2 3/4, 212 pounds, something like that. They're never as tall as they're listed at, but the weight can go up a little bit, especially with the way these guys train. And I've heard good things about Ziegler. He plays in Grand Rapids at Catholic Central. It's a really good program, has been for a long time. That's a kid that I think, along with Jalen Sneed, could play that overhang position. And that's important because it also allows something else. One of my most intriguing players on the Notre Dame roster is Jordan Patello. They had him playing that overhang linebacker drop position, rover, whatever you want to call it, part of this year. He is a pass rusher. And I know they're loaded there. You got to find, I don't know how you do it. That's why Marcus Freeman's making a heck of a lot more money than I am. Figure it out. With these guys, and I assume they're still going to be still pretty good there, there's no reason they can't do something to make a difference. There's just not. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Ziegler. He's straightforward, great athlete, lateral. He could play Will long time. I think Will is his future at some point, maybe as a senior or fifth-year senior, but I think he'll play the overhang position at least the first couple of years. That's such a hard spot. You need to have smaller bodies now. Anybody over 210, 215, at some point they're going to be going against a slot guy. Good luck. Better be careful for what you ask. But at least for now, I think he can play that. It's almost, for lack of a better term, a young college player's game is to play there because you haven't been hit as much, not beat up as much, and you haven't gained as much weight. It's more about speed and lateral quickness because it's coverage. If you can't cover, I don't care how well you do in the run game. If it's 3rd and 8 and they're smoking you, it's irrelevant. Notre Dame struggled in years past, not so much this year in that spot, but the last few years, Notre Dame's kind of figured it out, and their athleticism has taken over some. Using a safety there, like Elliott could play down in that area sometimes when he was still at Notre Dame. Obviously, they've had pretty good success the last few years. A certain young man that played at Notre Dame the last 2 at linebacker was ridiculous. But even this year, Kaiser was pretty good at it. Notre Dame's a pretty good spot. They just need to get some depth. If Kaiser got hurt, I'd be a little bit concerned. I'm hoping Ziegler and or Jalyn could make that run. The next guy that I want to talk about is actually Jaden Mickey. This is an interesting player, and I'm just not as confident in watching his film in saying that he's going to make it the same impact that Ben will. Maybe I'm wrong because he's pretty technically sound. He can run. He's fluid, all those things. But we'll see. Let me get this up here. I believe that we're talking about a situation where you're going to see a guy that can make plays. Let's back that up just a little bit. By year 2. If he's able to do that, I would be satisfied. But if he could make some plays this year, and this is another good way to show athleticism. Natural athlete, look how fluid he is. Can stop, uses his power, good balance. But it's still the corner skills. Side pedal and run and then jumps under. That's a really natural play. The only thing that I liked in it, I know these are just highlights, that I really liked Ben better than I did with really about any DB they've had recently is his ability to combine back pedal and power. Mickey can do some of those things too. He reminds me a little bit of the Kobe Bryant kid that played at Cincinnati that, of course, Mickens and those guys had. Just fluidity. I think Kobe won the award for the top corner in the country this year, and he deserves. He's a heck of a player. But this kid just needs to get a little bit stronger in my eyes. I still think he can play this next year, and he could be your nickel in part of the time. Right there's a good job of fighting through the ball. But I want to see him get a little bit bigger. It's not that he's not trying to be physical as he was right there. I think Ben Morrison's just a little bit stronger at this point. That play right there is phenomenal. His break on the football, matter of fact, I'll pull that back up. His break on the football here is tremendous. One more time. Watch him put his foot in the ground and move forward. Boom. Can't teach that. There's a reason that he had the ability to be recruited by so many schools. Corner is not a normal thing, man. Running backwards or doing side straddle, that's something that Coach Saban teaches at Alabama, side straddle. He's not a big back pedal guy. And then right here, he's pretty physical with this guy. Changed his route, makes the tackle. Notre Dame did very well with corner recruiting this year. I don't really care about the rankings. That right there is, a kill shot. He should be able to kill him there. He had his back to him, and he did. He did what he should have done. This is the last play I'll show. Oof. I mean, that is just thump. Needs to be kind of careful. He got some flag action there, but that's the kind of player that can kind of help change your program. Because take this chance here just to say the obvious, but why corner is so important and why I hate the way recruiting rankings work. If you have a 4 or 5 star corner, for instance, and you get X number of points on rivals, let's just use that. Okay, that's fine. But that same ranking at quarterback is not the same. If you don't recruit quarterback well, and Notre Dame fans should know this, you're in trouble. And if you don't develop them, sometimes they do good to start, and then it is. Brian Kelly couldn't coach quarterbacks to save his life. With that being stated, Notre Dame has just historically stunk at recruiting corner. 50 years. They get one guy who's just a total stud, and when he leaves, they go through a gap where they struggle. This is the second class in a row with Mickey and Morrison. You're talking about 2 really good players that can play in the SEC and start by year 2 at a program like Georgia or something like that. They have that ability. Whether or not they figure it out, but their back pedal, their physicality, their length, their innate ability to come up through their hands, knock a ball loose if it's a great ball, and still get an incompletion. That one play is the difference between winning and losing a lot of the time. Until Notre Dame figures out corner, everything else goes to the side. Everything. I told a buddy the other day that A.J. Harris, the corner out of Phoenix City, Alabama, is worth conservatively, even to a school like Georgia or Clemson or whatever, 5 scholarships. Why? He can man up your best player. I think he's the best player in the country for 23. He can man up your best player, take him away, and then your safeties, whatever you want to do, you've got carte blanche. Whoever gets him, unless it's just some off-the-cuff school like Mississippi State, in my opinion, is going to have a top 3 class pretty much by default. When there's a corner that's that special, it changes things. He's as good a corner as I've seen the last few years all around. And you can make the argument that Notre Dame didn't get A.J. Harris, and A.J.'s just taller, a little bigger than these two, but these two have all the same kind of skills. And they're going to play in a defense that fits their skills with Mickens and with Freeman and around guys that have understood now for the last several years downhill. The one thing Notre Dame does now is develop D linemen. It is insane. Notre Dame went from a school that couldn't find a D lineman to save their life 15 years ago. All of a sudden, every year guys are going to the draft. So Mike Elston has done one heck of a job, and so have the other coaches involved. So hats off to everybody, recruited them, developed them, helped them through academic, whatever it is they did. Kudos to you. The final piece, though, if you think Notre Dame's D-line was good before, think about the following. Guys like this, Mickey, guys like, well, not just Morrison and not just anybody that's in coverage. If Notre Dame is just quote unquote 5%, we'll just put it in numerical terms, 5% better, just 5% better in pass coverage, the back 7, you're going to increase sacks, quarterback hits, and turnovers. Oklahoma State just found one guy and just annihilated him. I've never seen a guy picked on more than that in my life. At least not that I can remember. If you get rid of that, Notre Dame wins by 30 points. That's how important corner is. And that's another reason that from an impact standpoint, I got Morrison. I'll just say number 1. It's either him or Tobias. Flip a coin. 6 one way, half dozen another. But Mickey's not far behind him either. They're both pretty physical. I just think that, again, I like Morrison's physicality. He's a little stronger, in my opinion, right now. It's pretty close. But one of those two is going to play this year. They've got a major problem at corner until otherwise proven. And maybe one of the kids from last year steps in and does something. I have no idea. That's why they go through spring ball. That's why they go through summer, and coaches can't be there. They run 7-on-7. We'll find out who the guy is, whoever it is. And if that guy is not ready, Notre Dame's going to get crushed against Ohio State, even if they match up on all the other 21 spots. You cannot be negligent at corner in today's world, especially against Ohio State. Say what you want about Ryan Day as a defensive-minded coach, which he's not, and whether or not he's a great head coach, and people question it, yours truly included. because I think he works too much on offense. This might be a game where they just beat Notre Dame 49-42 because they can't stop anybody. Either one of these two kids or somebody on the roster is going to have to step up. I was just looking at the transfer portal thing. There are no great corners coming out. Either they turn pro or they're staying where they're at. The only exception was Eli Ricks, and that was because of the travesty at LSU. It's ironic that Brian Kelly's going there. He's losing arguably the best corner in college football for next year, and he's going to Alabama. That's not very helpful either. The last couple of kids I want to talk about, they're players that you're familiar with. You may not know them the way I do. I've had the opportunity to meet one and talk to the other one on the phone a few times. Tyson Ford is a hell of a young man. Played at Burroughs, same high school that a certain Dallas Cowboys starting running back played at one point before playing at Ohio State. And he's just a great kid. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. But he's one of the weirdest kids. You know, I talk about the change in body. He was like 215, 220 going into his junior year. And he really dedicated himself. Then he was over 250. I said, how much you weigh now? He's like 255 or something. I'm like, whoa, what happened? What the heck happened? And I'm sitting here looking at his now like, did I miss something? Did I forget something? Tyson Ford is a 6'5", 6'6" kid that is now physically ready for major snaps, just physically, to play Division I at a high level. I'm not saying he's got the technique and he's going to beat out a bunch of guys, but he's what you want. Yesterday, I live in Tampa, and Riley Mills and his family live down in the greater Tampa area. You have to drive a little ways, but he's working out at the same gym that I go to, and there's a very special, dedicated group there called Trench Academy. And those guys, they do nothing but train D linemen and linemen and stuff like that in this back room, and it is insane. I walk in there, I know the guy that runs at Taylor, and he's 280 pounds and has a six-pack at 35 years old. He's nuts. But Riley Mills is in there. And Riley, he had 99 on. I'm like, that's Riley. Why is he here? And I asked Riley, and he said, yeah, we moved down here, blah, blah, blah. This kid, in a lot of ways, looks a lot like Riley. Tyson Ford is not all that far off. And Riley Mills is going to be a junior in college who's been through Notre Dame's conditioning program and my buddy's program. And they, by the way, Trench Academy trained some of the Buccaneers defensive linemen. To put it in perspective, elite training facility. And this kid, I just kind of watching some of his film, seeing him. I'm like, my goodness, this guy has a chance to be a really good player. He's in a bit of a log jam because Notre Dame, and it's a great problem to have, D-end is not a problem. As I mentioned earlier, Jordan Patello being on the edge, that's a scary dude. Oh, but if Foskey comes back, what the hell is he going to do? Is he going to start up? No, he's not going to start over Foskey. Foskey might be, except for Anderson. Will Anderson's the best player all around in college football, by the way. Except for Anderson is probably the best pass rusher for next season in all of college football. Will Anderson, for those of you who don't know, is only a sophomore in Alabama. He is back next year. So where do you find a way to get him on the field? I have no idea. I wanted to put him on, and then I was kind of looking at the depth chart, and I'm like, can he really make an impact? The way that Ford can make an impact is if he's using his hands well, he has a good fall camp, and he proves to Mike Elston and everybody else, even the O-line coach, Harry, if it's Harry Heastan, which is rumored to be, hey, this kid's beating some of my guys. You guys need to figure out how to put him on the field. He's going to have to prove it, even if it's in a package standpoint, because he's not going to beat out Mills and Foskey or whoever it is. Adamiola, they talk about the D tackle. His brother, the DN / outside linebacker, is a heck of a football player too. If he was the starter, he might have 7 or 8 sacks next year. Would not surprise me. Very good football player. But that does not mean that there isn't going to be a freshman D lineman. Could be another guy that has an opportunity to play. And in my opinion, Tyson Ford is that guy. Matter of fact, I'll pull up his film. I haven't watched it in a while. He's just really freaking good. And notice his levers, like his arms. When I was standing next to Riley yesterday, for a guy that's as big chested and everything that he is, he's really long. And it's one of the reasons that he's good. He can one arm somebody and get to the quarterback. Tyson's a lot like that. And just give me a second to pull up his film. But Tyson Ford is interesting because I'm not sure how his body is going to finish. Meaning he's an 18-year-old, give or take. He has a ways to go before he's done. Will he eventually, like Riley? Riley's moving to big end. I'm sure on 3rd and 8, he'll still play inside. But is that what Ford's going to do long term? That's something that's pretty interesting to me. I don't know what the best thing for him to do would be. Nothing great here. There's this one basic one here, but he doesn't have a senior footage, so I'll hold on there just a second. Let's share it. But just look at the levers, how long he is, and he's filled out. He's not a 215 kid any longer, and that is awfully important because it's just going to be a shorter time frame for him to have to make a play. All right. Now, speed is one thing. Let's back that up. I didn't get to see he made the play. On the edge, that is not a kid that weighs 260 in terms of how he runs. At least that's not what you would expect. Hands off with the hand swipe and gets off his guy. It's amazing that at his size, he's playing linebacker. He moves around quite a bit for them. Here they put him with his hand down, change direction, comes back and gets in on the play across the field. Now, this is not your normal kid, but he's also a lot more mature too, which helps. Like his handwork right there is pretty good. Dip underneath a big offensive tackle. He's playing in St. Louis. It's not like he's playing against nobody. And he's also obviously very physical. I like Ford long-term. I put him on this list just because of his natural size and length. Look at his arms. Look how long he is. This is a kid that I expect to play as a sophomore. If he gets on the field this next year, it's a bonus. But definitively, if Foskey's not there this year, it obviously increases the chance for him to play. They can move it around differently. But I also expect him to have the opportunity to play at least a little bit. I would think they would play him in 4 games and he could still redshirt technically. Do you use him right away, though, just to do it? No, you don't have to. It's just that his skill is so overwhelming. Like Will Anderson came in and started at Alabama. I'm not saying he's Will Anderson, but if a guy's good enough, play him. Why not? Tyson Ford, in my opinion, is one of those guys. The last player that I want to talk about is a kid that I went out to Texas to see. And I'll openly admit it. One of the reasons I did is because of where he played. Just north of Dallas, when you drive out of McKinney, it's the north suburb of Dallas, on this highway, you're immediately in Calgary. There is nothing. There's nothing. 40 minutes later, you're to the little area that he is from, Denison, Texas. And when I looked it up first, I'm like, I don't even know where that's at. And I know geography really well from following recruiting since I was in high school. I'm like, I've heard of it. I don't even know where that's at. But then when I saw it, I was like, well, I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that it's important there. When I went into their facility, their indoor facility at Denison was like being at a college. And this is not even the biggest division in Texas. They've got a few other kids that are really talented. And they've got some other kids that, have a chance to play some level of college football. But everybody, before I show it on the screen, I want to make sure everybody knows this. Out of like 20 plus years of following, recruiting, interviewing players, meeting players, coaches, I don't know of a single other player that I've met that is more mentally prepared. Forget where he's going to Notre Dame, but to take the next step. And here's why. I interviewed him on the record and off. The off the record is more important. I'll just give this much. He is focused on big picture. Big picture. The one thing I will share is he's like, well, I can play elite football at Notre Dame and I can get as good a degree as there is in the world. This is a no-brainer. And that was it. I mean, it was like done. He was looking at Stanford pretty hard prior, but they weren't real good at football. Notre Dame's obviously a lot better at football than Stanford. It's not even comparable. And that's why he ended up picking Notre Dame. Texas was his second offer when he was a freshman. The speed you're going to see on the screen here is good, but it is not the same as what I got to see in practice. And I was on the 3rd level, but they played at a soccer stadium in Dallas. I got this deal there in Dallas where all these teams play. It was ridiculous. He had 300 yards rushing and like 4 touchdowns. His speed is ridiculous. He was running away from guys in Dallas that didn't just have the angle. They looked like they were going to engulf him, and then they didn't physically make contact with him. He is ridiculously fast. So with that, I'll show some film here on Mr. Jadarian Price, but it's hard to put into perspective. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with watching highlights, but it's not the same. They run spread, and they run a lot of basic things, but once he puts his foot in the ground, it is sudden. He's as sudden a first-step player out of the backfield as there is in the country, and he just kind of coasts usually from about the 50 on because nobody's going to catch him anyway. He hardly is ever in quote-unquote top gear. This play right here is pretty good indicative. As soon as he wanted to go north, it was over. I mean, they can just run off the field now. He's not even in like full speed, and he's just, look how long his stride is. He's about 5'10 and a half, 5'11", and he's just running away from dudes. Basic downhill, makes a decision. That safety should have hit him. Let's watch that again. Watch the safety coming down from the middle of the screen right in through here in the middle. He should hit him, right? Right there, and just gets like a finger on him. It's hard to prepare for that kind of speed. He's a really strong kid, and believe me, he's shredded. I've seen him with his shirt off. He is shredded. But that ability right there, he took one step to his left and then just forget it. Those guys had the angle, and they didn't touch him. It's amazing. This kid right here, the safety, no chance. I know that Notre Dame has a lot of talent at running back, but as most people probably noticed, they didn't have a situation where they made a lot of plays after contact. This is a kid that's going to make play. And if they don't improve, he'll end up being the starter next year because you will not outwork him. I can tell you that now just from being around him. Jadarian Price is going to come in to try to take carries away. He reminds me of a lot of Kyron Williams in that mentality standpoint. They're totally different players in how they run the football, but from a mentality and being motivated to go straight ahead and do the best they can on every snap, Jadarian Price not only fits that, that's who he is. He is the poster child. And yes, before you ask, he does catch the ball very well. I was told by his head coach that he's their best receiver as catching the ball away, natural receiving skills. So that's going to help as well. This right here, just look at the gallop. It's just very natural to him. This is actually the game I was at. But he is very special because if you do not hit the crease and cut it off before he gets up even with you, it's over. He always ends up in the end zone if he gets past the safety. Nobody ever catches him from behind. That's the bottom line for speed. This is a funny play. This was the week before I saw him. This was the last time somebody kicked to him. 106 yards. Goodbye. I'll let that end it. But there's no reason to think that Jadarian Price isn't going to play in some capacity next year for Notre Dame. He's going to have to get bigger and stronger. When I asked his head coach, hey, what do you guys need to do? I said, the only thing he needs is time. There's nothing like an 18-year-old getting another 12 months. And he's right. Price is 190 pounds, give or take. If he comes into Notre Dame 202, 203, and he's able to keep that speed, they're going to find a way to get him on the field. Notre Dame has Logan Diggs, who I think the world of. I went and saw him play the year before, and then I just saw Price. They're different kinds of running backs, but they're both very determined. And then, of course, you got number 25, who has – I'd love to see Price run against him. That'd be a great race. You put Tyree and him in the same lineup, like you go 22 personnel and then go 5 wide with it, there's a lot of different possibilities. So I believe we're going to see something very special with Notre Dame's offensive capabilities. They just got to get the guys coached up to learn the playbook for checks. It's a big if. And I know fans say, well, why isn't somebody in the game? They've got to learn that, and you're just not going to know. You just got to leave it to the coaches to make the decisions. You're never going to know the answer to that, ever. So they're not going to tell you that a kid's struggling with the playbook. They're not going to embarrass their player. But oftentimes, off the record, as somebody who's worked in media for a long time, that is a problem. Price is a bright kid, though. Again, he was admitted to Stanford. I expect his ability to learn the playbook to be a little higher than many others. So anyway, to kind of wrap this up, those are the guys that I think can make the biggest impact. I think Morrison and Merryweather have the best chance, but there's several other kids too. Sneed, because of his ability to be an overhang linebacker, he could end up being that guy. And just from, if you had special teams as a priority, he's number one on the list. His ability to be a guy that can run down the field and make a tackle like a corner in terms of speed, but still be over 200 pounds, makes him a very, very valuable asset as a DB type guy in the slot, and being a special teams guy, etc. They're going to get him on the field. Josh Burnham, no reason he can't play. That's just a good football player. They'll find something for him. I don't know what it is, but he's going to play. I can't see why not. Ziegler is the same kind of thing. He's just a little bit smaller, so I'll take Burnham. Jaden Bellamy is a guy that would be the next one down the list for me. I think they're going to move some players around and safety will be taken care of. But if not, I think Bellamy can play at safety. I didn't talk about him much. I just want to mention that he's a kid I'm not sure how Notre Dame's going to use yet. I've watched his film several times and I like him, but he may get buried a little bit because they're moving guys to safety. Price, I love. Mickey, I love. Ford, I love. Let's just see who does something in fall camp. So anyway, just wanted to talk a little bit about the Irish in the recruiting class. Hopefully the corners can do something, because if they do, they can compete with anybody next year, Alabama included. If they don't figure out corner, they're a 10-2, 9-3 team. It's that simple. The other spots are for depth and for emergency situations. You know, just like with Morrison, Leofau, when he got hurt, it really hurt Notre Dame. You can't lose guys like that. You just can't. Even if you're Alabama, you can't lose NFL guys in the front seven of your defense. You go, oh, it's just going to be fine. No, it's not. So let's see how Notre Dame finishes up. But anyway, Brian Smith signing off. Hope everybody has a great day.